Yes, I'm Willie Harrison. I'm at Brigham Young University, and this work is a joint work with my student Darren Rowe, who's also here, and another professor at BYU named John Salmon. The two of us are engineering professors, and we love sports, so we do sports analytics in addition to our engineering research. So the outline of the talk, I'm going to introduce the topic. Sorry, I should go back to the title. How to analyze coaching, this is the way. Someone mentioned to me that this sounds an awful lot like the Mandalorian pitch line, and I will just say we came up with this first. So, but we published it second. So there you go.
That's the mistake.
Yes, that is the mistake. So, all right. So our methods, we'll talk about what is the way, apply it to the NBA. So some data from basketball, but it can be applied to any sport. And then we'll go through some results, finding the best coaches. Could you use this to inform Coach of the Year awards? Does it line up with people who've been winning Coach of the Year awards? We'll look at all of that, and then we'll look at some cumulative WAE graphs to show who are the best coaches over time, which are quite fun, and draw some conclusions. Okay, so first thing we should note is that there are plenty of player statistics in sports. Whichever sport you like, you can find it, and you can find it in lots of different ways. So if you want to understand how a player's affecting the success or failure of your team, most likely you can do it nowadays. There are simple statistics, the traditional ones usually, but there are also advanced statistics that paint a better picture. So what about coaching? And if you start looking at coaching, and let's just take the NBA as an example, there are win-loss records. There are win-loss records in the regular season, win-loss records in the postseason, and beyond that, you don't really get very much. So where are the advanced statistics, and how do you analyze coaching? How do you determine whether a coach is any good or not? And it's fraught with challenges, but we took those on and tried to come up with the first way to do it. So the first thing we should note is that not all wins are created equal. So here are some examples. In the National Basketball Association, there are 82 games per season. Suppose you win 35. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Probably depends, right? In the Major League Baseball, there are 162 games in a regular season. Suppose you win half of those. Is that good or bad? Again, probably depends. So let's just take this NBA 35-win team. And suppose that your players in general are less skilled than the average players on a court. Then you might say 35 is a great result, actually. Probably your coaching is pretty good. And if the players are generally more skilled, then you would look at this as a failure, right? You would be really unsatisfied with this result. So we need a way that can take all of this into account, and WAE stands for wins above expected. So there's an expected value that we're going to calculate for what we think a team should accomplish on average, given the talent on the team, and then we calculate the wins above that. So negative would be bad, positive would be good, and this should be able to help us with the cases. So there are some things that we need to make sure that we do. First, we need to rank coaches independent from the player skill. That's hard, and then whatever's left, we're going to call the WAE. But if you start thinking about all the things that are left, there's a lot that's left, right? If your team gets along with each other, then that can help you. Is that coaching? That's kind of coaching. Player development, yeah, that's coaching. Head coach skill, coaching staff skill. What about luck? There's plenty of luck. We all know this in sports. That's probably why we all like it, because it's random and somewhat unpredictable at times. So what do we think about the luck? We think it'll balance out. And everything else, we're going to call it coaching, right? We're going to say that that's the whole point of being a coach, is to affect team camaraderie, player development, etc. All right, so we're going to try to measure all the aspects of building a good team outside of player talent. So the first thing we should note is that when we did this, we took our player talent statistics and tried to correlate it with what we had for our coaching statistics, and they appear uncorrelated. So in fact, very, very uncorrelated based on just that that data that I'm presenting there. So it looks as if we're on the right track. Okay, we would like to not punish a coach for player injuries. Now, this one is a little, well, it's interesting because sometimes it actually is the coach's fault that a player gets injured, right? You can overplay a player and that could be your fault. But for now, we're going to say it's not. So if the player is unavailable, we won't count it against you. So what is WAE going to measure? A coach's ability to get the most out of the hand they are dealt. Okay, this is a gambling metaphor that I think encapsulates what we're trying to do. So we're only going to use regular season data because some teams don't make the postseason. Postseason is very important, we realize, but we want to compare all coaches. So regular season is where we're at. Okay, so here's the calculation. There are two steps. You need to calculate the expected number of wins given however much talent you have. And this is going to require a model, right? It's going to assume average coaching because we're going to take all of the data into account. So all the coaches that have coached, say in the NBA for our use case, but whatever league you're applying this to. And so you have to come up with a model. How many wins do you expect given the talent on your team? Once you have that model, then you can calculate the WAE. And the WAE is just little w minus the expectation of w. And R sub t is your team rating. That's just a parameter that you take into account in your expectation. Capital W is the random variable for w. So the expectation is how much you expect to win given the talent. W is how much you actually did win, and the difference is the WAE. Right, so yeah, we should just point out that if you do use this, be careful, because a negative WAE just means that you're slightly below average, but it doesn't necessarily mean you should be fired, right? Let's just assume that the best 30 possible NBA coaches are already coaching an NBA team. If that's true, then even a negative WAE doesn't mean you should be fired, right? It just means that you're below average with your peers. So this is not a wins above replacement kind of a thing where we don't know who's out there. We don't know what the replacement value is, just average, okay? So hopefully we don't get anyone fired is what I'm trying to say. All right, so the WAE in the NBA, here's how we're going to do it. We're going to use player efficiency rating as our talent measure. And we're going to add it up in an expected way based on the number of minutes played. And we're going to adjust in terms of age. So if a player ages, there's an expected change in overall performance that we can anticipate. And this tends to mean that younger players get better if they're not in fact getting cut from the team. And older players will deteriorate over time. And there are models for this that you can take into account. So here is the player skill rating. Again, number of minutes played by each player times their expected PER by using their previous 3 PERs if they exist, and also the age adjustment. Okay, and we just add those up over n players in the team, and you get an overall team rating. Okay, so these are the actual models for calculating that expectation. And they come from the data, so these are estimates of the expectations. They're basic regression models, so you just need to chuck some data in and come up with these numbers, and then you can calculate an overall team rating. The last one is for rookies. Rookies are hard. We don't have any previous data from them except for college, but college data is a bit like the Wild West is, I think, the metaphor that we prefer to use. It's just difficult to know what you're getting. Okay, so here's the way we did it. We tried to come up with 3 models. We wanted wins as a function of team rating, and the team rating is the thing that we calculated on the last slide. And all those data points, that's 1969 through 2020. So it's quite a few seasons worth of data, and we had to model it in some way. So as you can tell, there's some randomness, and as you can also tell, the ends have problems. There aren't a lot of teams that have, say, lost, less than, say, 10 games. There's only a couple, or sorry, only one less than 10 games. And teams that win over, say, 70 games, again, there's very few. And then team ratings left and right, not as much. There's a lot of data in the middle. So we came up with 3 different ways, actually lots of different ways, but I'm showing you 3. There's a linear model, a 3-segment linear model, and then the red one is the one that we went with, which was the Robit 4P logistics curve. But we looked at lots of things, including neural nets, in trying to effectively model this. But the red curve minimized the overall root mean squared error, so that's the one that we went with. And now we can calculate the WAE. So again, the red is the model. You calculate your team rating, and it's based on previous years, not the current year of talent. So where do we expect that your team should be? And then we see how many games you actually won, and whatever the difference is, that's the WAE. Okay, so some results. How am I doing on time? Okay?
You're doing very good.
Okay, excellent. All right, so some results from 2020 to 21 season. Using this model, we ranked all 30 coaches in the NBA, and this was the weird shortened COVID year where teams couldn't really practice as well as they normally would. They don't really practice a lot during the regular season anyway, but certainly practice was a problem because there were rules about getting too many people together at the time. So yes, I'm from the state of Utah. It so happens that the best coach of that year was from Utah. Maybe that's why I got interested in this question to begin with, because I thought that our coach was doing a great job and I wasn't getting credit for it. And it turns out that was true. And then only later did I find out that he had some fairly innovative practice techniques that worked really, really well during COVID. So he was, in fact, the best regular season coach. So that was really cool. But some of these were surprising, like Mark Lavno. You can see he's, I think, 8th in the list. And his team was dreadfully awful that year. This was the Oklahoma City Thunder, and they were one of the worst teams in the league. But if you follow the NBA, you know that now they're one of the best teams in the league. So we were probably right. That's all I want to say. Now the green name, that's Tom Thibodeau for the New York Knicks, and he was the coach of the year. And I think it's because the media loved the Knicks because they're in New York City and they finally had a winning season. So, but was he the best coach? Based on our data, we would say no. He was good, certainly very good, but probably not the best that year. So that just begs the question, how are we doing in terms of rewarding the best coaches over time? So this is a plot that shows a lot. We have red dots above, we have green dots in the middle, and down here we have red curves, green curves, and blue curves. The blue curve is just the average WAE for the year, so kind of keeps you in touch with the baseline. The green curve is the coach of the year winner, and the red curve is the best WAE for the year. So the best coach is red, the perceived best coach is green, and the average is blue. And as you can see, they don't really match up very well. There are 5 times out of 21 at the time that we ran this analysis in the last 21 years of NBA data, where the coach of the year was in fact, at least according to our statistic, also the best coach. So that was surprising. But then there were some other things, some other problems that we had. So let me see if I can highlight this for you. If I get a mouse. No, I'll just point at it. So we have Brad Stevens is here. And if you'll note, there are 3 dots in a row. So he was actually the best coach in the NBA for 3 years running. But you don't see his name in this list. He never won Coach of the Year, which I thought was interesting. So sometimes we get it dreadfully wrong for years in a row. I suppose he probably should have won Coach of the Year at least once, right? And then we have the very, very highest red peak on this bottom plot. That's Steve Kerr with the Golden State Warriors in his very first season with the Warriors. And I don't know if any of you remember back to that time or if you follow the NBA enough to know, but the Warriors weren't very good until Steve Kerr all of a sudden made them very, very good. And a lot of the players that we know on that team were in fact there before, just not performing as well. So his was the best WAE of any season, and he didn't win Coach of the Year that year. So just kind of interesting. We feel like this could inform those decisions. All right, let's look at some cumulative WAE. Am I almost done?
When I stand means something.
Okay, very good. Let me quickly show you then. These are all the coaches in our database, and we look at how much WAE they achieve over time. Steve Kerr has the best start, and Greg Popovich has the best overall. So again, for you NBA people, you'll probably not be terribly surprised. All the coaches that were still coaching in 2021, Greg Popovich was far and away the best in terms of lifetime achievement. But we see a lot of good coaching, a lot of upward trajectories, and some that go down and some that get fired. So yeah, just kind of interesting to see how all that turns out. Okay, some shortcomings. What if the team is trying to lose? I don't want to say that teams do this, but they do. So I guess I did say it. And we're not going to take that into account very well. And then there's some high variance in some places. So conclusions are that we feel like we've been able to do it. To some extent, we've been able to identify what the best coaches are and give a method that can be adapted to other sports as well. And I think I'll end there. So, if there are any questions?
Thank you. Me say something. Sometimes when you win, you lose. And when you lose, you win. Is it something you can consider in your model? There is winning and winning.
Right, right. So this is the, shortcomings of the model, I would say. If we come back to this list, there are teams who've been losing, not necessarily on purpose, but developing players, shall we say, right? You have younger players, you feel like it's important to get them experience, so you play them knowing full well that you'll probably lose by doing it. And no, we don't take that into account at all. So I think, if you look at some of our results, like Greg Popovich has been legendary for years, and towards the end, it looks as if he's not as good. I would argue that he's probably developing players during that.
Yeah. Okay.
Very interesting analysis. Do you have any information, any coach did a good job by using innovative data analytics, sports analytics behind the secret kind of, that's why the team did well? Do you have any correlation or evidence between the reason they did well from sports analytics?
Have we analyzed coaching techniques that maybe indicate
maybe their data science team hire a new guy, have some kind of
right? We haven't taken any of that.
I understand a lot of those are pretty secret, right? They don't want to publish that.
Yes,
so
yeah. These data are very hard to come by, especially for a lowly academic like myself. If I was working with an NBA team, I could probably get it from my team, but to get it for all 30 teams would be really difficult. That's right.
Yes. Please introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Alexis Martelier from the University of Caen. Thank you for your presentation. Did your metrics catch when coaches are bad, but are be carrying by players?
Sorry, say it again.
Is your metrics can show if a coach isn't good, but the team is winning because players are really good?
Yes, absolutely. So
this is a good question.
Okay, so the example I'll show you is Mike Dunleavy Sr. Ended up all the way at the bottom. If you look at his very first coaching year, it was slightly positive, but he had a really, really good team. He inherited the Lakers from Pat Riley. And I think they won the year previous. Is that right, Darren? So that they won the championship, and then Pat Riley retires, Dunleavy's hired. He was only slightly above average in that year. I think they went back to the finals or the Western Conference Championship. They were pretty good that year, but notice that we just give him a "you were okay" kind of a rating. Like, you really weren't that special. Your team was very good, but in fact you were not, right? And over years, he had some good years and bad years, but mostly bad, right? He resigned twice, was fired once, but he lasted for 17 years in the NBA. So yeah, I think our metrics do take that into account.
Hi, my name is Gerard Buitema from Stellenbosch University, and I really like the talk. It was very informative and it's very innovative. I've got, first question is, do you take the pressure of the game into account anyway? For example, a playoff game might have a bit more pressure involved, and therefore it might, do you take that into account anyway?
Not yet. I think this could be a nice extension of the work that we've done. But we only use regular season data because not all teams make the playoffs. So we do want all 30 teams evaluated. So yeah, we ended at the regular season.
I didn't catch what the regular season means, but that is.
No, thanks for asking the question. Perfect.
Thank you. And then the second question is, let's say, for example, you have a team that, like the case you just mentioned, they won the championship, so they are arguably the best team in the league. And now a new coach comes in, and that coach gets an excellent team. Would that not, in a sense, be biased, negatively biased against the coach, because the expected wins for that team is higher than the expected wins for, let's say, for example, another team?
Right. No, I agree with you. And I would say, because we are taking into account player talent from previous years, we expect something great from that coach, right?
Yeah.
But I would say that, this graph is perfect. If you look at, say, Greg Popovich over the years, he had an excellent team, but his way was still positive, right? So I actually do think we've taken all that into account and removed it from the analysis, because good coaches tend to be rewarded year after year after year, despite having a good team already. So yeah, it's interesting.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for your presentation.